Most general managers think their job is to run shifts. It's not. That's survival. The real job is creating a restaurant that runs without them. Hello again. My name is Neil Hollingshead, and this is Restaurant Within. And we'll be talking about lots of things that happen within the four walls of a restaurant. Today, I'm discussing the general manager's job. It's one of the most rewarding jobs that I think I ever had in the restaurant industry. It's a lot of fun. Learning the skills of being a general manager was the most challenging. I'm going to go over some of the challenges that I found in the general manager's job, and hopefully it'll help somebody out there that's trying to do it now. But I would say the number one challenge that I had was realizing that everything inside of those four walls was related to my behavior, whether that behavior was to raise my standards. Sometimes it was to change my own personal behavior. Sometimes it was to look in the mirror. Sometimes it was to take a day off and get a refresher on how the place looked. But there's a system that you need to develop. And I call it developing a playbook on how to make that role work. There are a lot of general managers out there that as soon as they have an issue, their first response is to point a finger, blame somebody. And there are a lot of systems out there that you have to work inside of as a general manager. Some of the micromanaging type leaders, a lot of the times they won't allow general managers to make the decisions that they need to make to even run the business right to start with, because the general manager's got to be empowered to be able to create a certain culture. That really is where you begin to create a restaurant that operates without you, is to have a really, really good culture. And to have that culture, there's a couple of things that have to be true. Number one, you have to have the experience to be able to efficiently deal with the things that happen in your restaurant. You have to have really good judgment. So when things go wrong, first things first, look in the mirror. Did I do something that would have allowed this behavior to happen? If so, it's not really that big of a deal. I learn things like that all the time, even still. But it is important to be able to stop at that moment and say, hey, I'm sorry I made these decisions and made this happen. Let's make these changes and hopefully it fixes everything. And oftentimes that works right through situations that you wouldn't be able to work through otherwise. At the time that you make the decision about something that's going wrong in your restaurant, there's a few things that you need to know. If it's an employee that maybe is not working out, maybe they've got bad job performance, maybe you have to look in the mirror and say, how did this person get here? Did we vet this person out properly before we hired them? Did they have long-term ability proven in their past before we hired them? Or did we get in a rush and hire somebody too fast that didn't have that ability? Secondly, did we train them enough to be able to do their job and to work through all the difficult parts of their job confidently without any hesitations or frustrations? Because I found frustrations come from all the things that happen to you at work that you don't know how to solve. Dealing with an employee that's late, that's not stressful. It's not stressful because you've done it a million times. You know exactly what to do. But do you know how to handle every situation that way? And so when you get down into cost controls, when you get down to labor, when you get down to food costs, you get down to liquor costs, you get down to all the repair and maintenance things, the core of what costs you money at all of those things is the system. When it's food, how are we buying? How are we portioning? How are we putting it back out? Or do we stay disciplined, especially at closing time? Do we shorten up what we're cooking at closing so we have nothing left over, nothing to throw in the trash? Do we do good lineups before the shift to get everybody focused on the check times we want, the food presentations we want, the quality of food that we want, so we have the opportunity to build sales? Because building sales is the heart of us staying in this and being successful long term. The bottom line is that as a GM, you've got to have the play in your head that works. And then challenge number two begins, because you've got assistant managers that work for you. And they're all going to be good at some things and they're all going to be bad at some things. How do you stack them into the program so that your aces are in their places and they are where they're supposed to be when they need to be? There are a lot of different things that an assistant manager needs to be good at. They've got to be disciplined. And as a general manager, the culture from the whole building comes from you. And the number one thing that you've got to teach a team of people, especially when you've got 100 people in a building that are all depending on you to lead them properly, the number one challenging thing to teach people is how to deal with all of the things that we have to face in a positive way. It's the number one thing, because the minute that you start to become negative, you start doing things that you may not understand or biting you in the butt, but they are. And so you have to be able to deal with all kinds of things. If you don't feel like you can deal with a situation in a positive way, take it off and go home and get some sleep. Come back and deal with it the next day. Even if you have to let an employee go home for the rest of the shift and come back the next day to talk with you. That's the best thing to do to deal with situations where you have time to reflect on all the stages of how we're going to do what we're going to do. And I like to have all the managers sitting into discipline conversations with me because I want to be helpful to them throughout the rest of their lives. And that really is not tied to the job. Now, us being in this job together is tied to us having success. Now, I'll take responsibility for everything that I can, but at the same time, the employee or manager, they've got to take responsibility for their own behavior. I can't go home thinking about everything I need to improve to make this organization better and have all of y'all go home and thinking about what I can do to make this organization better too. You got to think about what you can do, and I got to think about what I can do. But the agreement comes into both of us giving our best effort. You got to hire people that are tough enough and durable enough to deal with the restaurant business. And trust me, when you find that person, they can also deal with the truth. And I think that's a huge part of how you create a solid restaurant. There has got to be positive honesty. And when I say that, I mean it like this. When somebody's late, it isn't just, hey, you got to come to work on time or you're not going to work here. Employees and managers form perceptions based off of the things that we say. And the number one thing I think that comes back to you when you don't deal with things the right way is employees and or managers saying, well, this person don't like me. If you have that statement made, that's just poor behavior on the part of the general manager or denial on part of the employee. In order to keep the slate clean, every development meeting has got to start like this. I like the things that you do here. I feel fortunate to be able to work with you, but these other things aren't going our way. Let's talk about what we can do to get better at those. And if you get resistance before you even bring the subject up or the topic up, you're off track. And so that's where decisions have to be made. Can this relationship be made better? Am I accidentally spending time with everybody else in the building except this person, therefore making them feel unwelcomed, unwanted, and out of place, disconnected from me, so they're not interested in following? And there's still plenty of people out there that want to work for a disciplined restaurant. But then the GM, not only looking in the mirror in terms of how you deal with situations, but also how is your system? Does it take you 90 hours a week to do all the things that you need to do? I was incredibly efficient in the office because I don't like being in the office. That's probably where I'm the most irritable. And then getting in the dining room, it's really supervision and a little bit of babysitting and kissing babies and trying to find relationships out there is the part of working the shift. And then the steps of how we get ready and break down through the course of the day. That's the day's execution. So as a general manager, how efficient are you at those things? I went in early all the time. I usually went in about an hour early because I wanted time to evaluate my business. And I know more than anybody that I have to be completely reliable to have a successful shift above and beyond everybody else in the building. Probably the worst thing that can happen to you as a GM is to be known for having failing shifts. That's the most difficult thing that can happen to you as far as making people want to follow you. That's certainly going to make people want to quit if you can't run a decent shift. But beyond that, you've got a lot of things that have to be done. You've got to analyze weekly every behavior in that building, and you've got to be able to spot the people who need time. Do they need development? Do they need discipline? Do they need follow-up? Do they need a connection? And then the department managers, how is their role going? How are they spending their time? Do I see them spending 90% of their work week talking about every individual's employee schedule in the building? Because a lot of employees like to have that conversation. They like to remind the manager that they need Saturday off. That is a preferred topic throughout the industry. And as a general manager that's been in it for a long, long time, I would tell you that's a conversation that I just don't allow. We've got technology today that'll tell me when you're available. It'll tell me what days you want off. It'll tell you what time I've got you scheduled in, what time I've got you scheduled out. And as long as that work is done right, there's really not a whole lot left to talk about. And I don't even mind in the office before or after a shift for a second discussing a follow-up issue of a schedule. I'm not too concerned with that. But making it a daily work habit, this is the main part of what I do today, is to talk about the schedules. Even worse is when you have a whole restaurant team that has conditioned themselves to make a daily topic out of how you've staffed the restaurant. That's when they begin to take the restaurant up, because now they know better than you do how many people are supposed to be there, whether or not you're short, whether or not you're over. And they may be right. I've seen a lot of trainers, especially, that absolutely know better than the managers do what we need for today to be successful. And I encourage managers to identify that. When you've got somebody that has that kind of skill level, you don't shun them and push them backwards. You get their help. Have them come sit down with you for a little bit, because a lot of times those people are interested in being involved in the schedule process and they do know things that'll help. That's very helpful. But I would never turn somebody away that I felt like could help me to make a better schedule, because again, at the end of the day, it's about winning. And in order to win, you got to let your guard down and be willing to get information from anywhere. You can get information about how to run a shift. You can get information about how to handle a situation. You can get information about anything. But for a GM, you've got to know within a 7-day schedule how you're going to play out all the things that need some time from you. And if you don't do that well, you're going to find that your shifts constantly get interrupted by things you didn't give time to that you should have. And it makes it nearly impossible to run a great shift. If running a great shift is where you're going to build sales. Building sales is what gets everybody their money, because you've got all the employees banking on those sales to pay their checks. You got all the managers banking on those sales to pay their salaries. The owners are banking on all of you to create a culture that not just wins today, but that is set up to win for the next 10 or 20 years if they choose to stay at it that long. So that's the challenge. And getting to where we can run 14 shifts a week, lunch and dinner or whatever your restaurant is set up to do, is one part of the goal. But at the same time, to me, the goal of a general manager is to get out there and make sure that I have the hottest restaurant in the city. And in order to do that, I've got to have good connections. I've got to have hotel general managers and different marketing people. Sometimes it's radio people, sometimes it's TV people, but I try to get as many people as I can to have me on speed dial for their group and for their situation, so that I can create a pulse throughout a city, especially if I've got a chamber of commerce. That's a great place to have a bunch of people that have you on speed dial. Because out of that group, there's going to be somebody almost every week that's got something going on. They could use somebody in the food and restaurant business. But in order to have that list of things, you've got to be able to work the dining room well, or you've got to allocate time to go out to businesses to get those type of connections. But in that general manager's role, you can start off on Monday morning, whatever your first day of the week is, and say, it's Monday. So I start off Monday morning and I do a complete evaluation of the business from last week. Were we up or down versus last year? Did we run decent labor? What did our food costs look like? What did our comps and promos look like? How did our turnover go? What was the energy on the shifts? Did I think we had success overall or failure? The one question that I like to come away from on Monday morning when I'm done with my homework, did we execute well enough to grow? Because if the answer to that is no, the manager's meeting is, what is it that we're about to change? Because I have to know that we're executing well enough to grow sales. And that's the end conversation. I've got in the morning a little bit of administration that I'll do, usually 2 to 3 hours, that I'll evaluate all the numbers. I leave myself 1 hour for a deep dive into whatever I want, whether it is how daily sales affected us, lunch and dinner throughout the course of the week. Maybe I'll get all of the promos in front of me and break every one of them down one at a time to see who was the lead issues. I may break down schedules to see how our labor unfolded, but I'll leave myself an hour for a deep dive into stuff. About every 20 or 30 minutes, I'm going to get up and walk that dining room down and walk the kitchen down, just make sure everything's okay and go back to doing what I do. I'll be getting manager meeting notes put together so that I can cover all of the topics. I usually go to the calendar and make sure anything that's upcoming from the organization, from a menu rollout or holidays or anything like that I see coming. We go to the managers meeting. We have a managers meeting for about an hour to an hour and a half. I've never required my managers that were off to be at those meetings. I don't like interrupting off days, because I think being able to work a good schedule to come back with energy every day is a major part of enjoying a manager's job. But I will take notes and email it to any managers that are off that day so that they don't get behind. And after that manager meeting goes by, one final walk down, gather my stuff and get ready to get out of there on Monday. And the rest of the week, for me, I do strategically place my schedule in a way that I'm in the most valuable places that I can be. But I also try to break up the high volume on the weekend for all the managers because I don't like the grind of Thursday through Sunday. If you adopt all of that every week, you're going to find yourself running wide open an awful lot. There is some value to those slower shifts. Everybody gets to get some planning done. And so I like for everybody to have an equal distribution of slow and busy shifts to be able to do their planning. But then the other thing that I'm going to address every time in a manager's meeting is our staffing. Are we doing good background checks? Who are we hiring? How many trainers do we have? Who's being developed? Because I want to know that everybody in my management team is moving as many people forward as they can. I don't really necessarily need a bunch of leadership just running that one restaurant, but at the same time, I feel like I owe it to everybody that works for me to set them up to take advantage of the next promotion or the next opportunity to move forward, because these businesses weren't just put here for me. And so there are a lot of people that would like to make more money. I like developing people a lot. I move a lot of people forward that work with me because I think that that is the most valuable thing that can come out of these businesses. Yes, I think we should make money for owners, and I don't want to be unsuccessful at being profitable, but I'm going to stay focused on a couple of things. Number one is going to be, can I come in here and bring the heat every time I come to work and not be affected by the elements in the business? Can I produce the culture in this restaurant that I want to produce regardless of the choices that everybody else makes? That's the number one thing that I'm teaching. I'm not saying I do it all the time, because there are sometimes I get frustrated and everybody around me knows when I've had enough. But then the second thing is, how consistently can I do what I do? A staff will know my timing for events sometimes better than I do. They know if I happen to leave at 8:30 every Tuesday night, that whole crew would get conditioned to that. And if they can get conditioned to that, they will absolutely let their guard down at that time. And weird things will happen. If you had anybody that wanted to pull off something sneaky, it's going to happen when they know that you're out of the building. You're not there. And so there's a lot of times where I'll maybe go a month and get into that routine. I might leave at 8:30. I also might turn around and come back at 9:30. I might take 6 months and not work on Sundays, and I might come in there Sunday morning and Sunday night. Now, when I come back, do I have good news? Do I have good energy? Sure, I do. I don't come in there to trigger people or to find things wrong. I go back in there so that I know they don't know when I'm coming and going. And that's a big part of what the general manager has to do, to keep people kind of on their guard so that they are always trying to do the right things for the right reasons. And the better a job that you do running a great system, the better job that you'll do of making the crew do the things they need to do to make you successful. When you get to the point where everybody that works for you is giving you their best effort and focus, you find a lot of success. There's just not a lot of restaurants out there like that. So most GMs stay stuck in daily operations all day, every day, and they don't fix the systems that actually create issues for them to begin with. The systems matter more than the one-offs. If you have somebody that has a bad attitude, and let's say they have a bad attitude in front of 25 people, you can pull that person aside and fix the attitude issue for sure. But now you've got to make sure that whatever reaction you have also deals with the perspective that those other 25 people had. One person can have behavior, and a lot of GMs will deal with that one person, but they don't deal with the other 25. So the perspective out there is that there's a consequence for the poor behavior. And that's a big part of being a GM to me, is making sure that whatever the issue is, that the correction is as big as the issue. If your managers aren't improving, that's on you as a GM, because your job is to develop them all the time. If you're a GM, your job is not to survive today. Your job is to create something that works really well long term. This is episode 1 for the GM. This is the Restaurant Within, and we will be going over this again a little bit later on in the future. I look forward to having y'all, and thank you for your time.